Okay, Cashduck Bowcraft here, and what I was going to do today is show you guys how I process feathers. These are wild turkey feathers, and basically what we're going to be doing today is cutting them down to size, splitting the quill, and grinding them down. So I thought that I might show you how I do it today. So what we're going to be doing is I'm sorry, I'm just looking at these and looking at how many feathers I have to actually do, and there's a lot. So I'm going to do one, and I'll show you how I go about doing it. So I'll get the camera up and show you step one. Okay, so basically what I do, I'll just take a feather and let's see what I got here. Just grab my razor blade here, and I'll just there's like a natural line that goes down the middle of the quill, and I'll just get down the middle of it, and then just very carefully just split it. You can also trim the quill like this, you know, and trim it all the way down to the bottom. But I'm going to be grinding these feathers, and I want to spend a less amount of time grinding them as possible. So basically what I do, I just go ahead and split them right down the center, because you'd have to grind all that stuff off anyway. And if the feather is long enough, sometimes you can get two fletchings off of one feather. So you want to be careful when you're splitting them, because obviously if you want to get two feathers out of a quill or out of a feather, two fletchings out of a feather, you don't want to damage one end or the other. So there you go. We just trim the feather off, we split the quill, and now what we're going to do, we're going to cut this thing down to size. Okay, so what I do when I cut this thing down, I just have a piece of wood here that I taped together and made myself a little clamp. And what I do, I just insert the feather into the clamp, and I'll just use these scissors. I usually use a pair of cutters, but I'll just use them. I'm going to get them right now. I just use a pair of wire cutters because I like the flat edge here that I can get right up against here and cut it straight. So that's all you do. You cut that off. Then we've got this other piece here. This feather was over 10 inches. And we're doing a 5-inch feather. Cut the top off. And there you go. I've got two fletchings that I can put on an arrow. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and grind this edge flat, so that when it sits on the arrow shaft, it'll be close to the shaft, and it'll sit nice and square and snug on the shaft. And basically what I do with that, again, I've just got a little piece of sheet metal that I tape together to make a clamp out of. I just put the feather in there so I can hold it, just like that. Then I come over to my belt sander here. It's going to get noisy, so bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and grind this down. Okay, so you can see in no time it grinds down pretty flat. You can see that the fletching is pretty flat here, so when it sits on the shaft, it'll lay flat on the shaft. Now what we're going to do is, I don't know if you can see this or not, but you can see this large edge protruding out. What we want to do with that is trim that down as close as we can get it. And again, I just use this clamp, and we'll take it over to the drum sander and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so we're back. What we're going to do is we're going to trim off this leading edge on this feather here, so that it doesn't hang off of the shaft when you glue it on. You don't want too much extra material on there than you need for it. So basically, I just take my clamp again, I put it back in this piece of sheet metal that I put tape on, and what we're going to do, we're going to grind this off. Now, they sell jigs at various archery places where it's like a wooden contraption, and you put the feather in there, and it helps you guide to grind the feathers down. But for me, that stuff is way too expensive to do what we need to do. And although if you do use it, I suppose with feather cutters and things of that sort, you'll have a more uniform look. And for those of you out there that make and sell arrows, I suppose that would be a good thing, because you want to make sure you get quality. But I enjoy doing this stuff by hand. I like the fact that my arrows look like they were actually handmade. No two arrows that I make are exactly the same, and no two feathers that I grind are exactly the same. So this is the way I do it, and it's easy to do it rather than to spend all that money on these fancy contraptions. So I'm going to turn on the drum sander here, and I'll show you how I sand these feathers down. Anyway, I don't know if I showed you the before picture, but that's the way it looks before. You could see how much material is hanging off the edge here. Alright, there's the after shot, and you could see that the material that I removed is now flush with the edge of the of this clamp here. So we'll remove this. You can see the feather is both flat and narrow, so that it'll sit quite nicely on the arrow shaft. There's enough surface area here to glue. And like I said, it's pretty flat, and there's no extra material to hang off of the shaft, so that when you shoot it, it doesn't gouge your finger or rip on your finger. But anyway, that's how I process feathers, and I'll show you how I cut them too in the next video. Okay, so what I did, I went ahead and just glued on feather, glued on the feather to a shaft, and you could see that it sits reasonably flat and level on the shaft. So that's how it looks front view. So what I do now is, usually what I do when I attach my feathers to the shaft is I'll just trim off a little bit off the front, trim off a little bit off the back, and then I'll bind each end to the shaft. Most people, when they're fletching an arrow, they'll just glue the feathers on and just leave them like that. But when I make an arrow, I'll bind them to the shaft, because that's just how I make them. After I get through cutting the ends, this little part that's coming out here, I'll cut that flush, or cut it straight across, just like that. and now it's ready to cut. A lot of people at this point they'll either use a feather chopper to chop the shape of the feather before they glue it on to the shaft, or they'll use a feather burner to burn the shape of the feather once it's attached to the shaft. And the way I do it, or at least the way I used to do it, was I would just get a pair of scissors and just eyeball it and cut the shape that I wanted. But what I do now, since I'm constantly making arrows, I just went ahead and made myself a wooden jig here to help me cut my feathers and making sure that they're all at reasonably the same shape and size, because I used to do it by eye before. So what I'll do, I'll just take this wooden piece of wood here that I've cut out to the shapes of the feathers that I typically cut, and I'll just set it right on top of the feather, right on top of the lip. And then I'll take my scissors and just cut out that shape. And there you go. Here's my feather right there. If you do it fast like I just did, sometimes you'll get rough edges, so you just trim it down. And then what I'll do on the ends here, either I'll leave them the full length, or what I do here, I just eyeball it and just cut a diagonal cut just like that. So there you go. That's how I process, attach, and shape my feathers, and I just wanted to share that with you. Cashtook Bowcraft, thanks for watching.